You go into a bookshop like this, and if you ask somebody for a history of the world, one of two things may happen. You might be directed this way to the science section, and you'll see a history of the world, and it starts with the beginning of life on Earth, perhaps 4 billion years ago, goes all the way through roughly to the Stone Ages, and then it'll stop, because then people take over. And if you want to hear the rest of the story, you have to go to the history section, and you buy another book that's also called The History of the World, and it starts in ancient Mesopotamia 7,000 years ago, and it goes all the way to the present day. It's a history book, and somehow the Stone Ages get missed out of both of them, the poor old Stone Ages. So I thought I'll try and connect it all together. We'll go from the beginning of time to the present day. It's in 4 sections. There's life before people, then there's the Stone Ages, where people's brains get bigger and they start using their hands and they start becoming quite different from our biological relatives, chimpanzees. And then they start agriculture. That's the big deal, really. That takes you out of the Stone Ages and gets you into ancient history. And then we go through into ancient history, where people live in towns and cities because they go farming and they trading, they have somewhere to store their land, their food, etc. And then they start connecting to the world together, and the final part is globalization. That's the story of modern history, to my mind, because it's all about how the world's connected together. You don't have to go to China to get rice these days. You don't have to row all the way to Australia to see an Aboriginal. You just pick up the phone. And how has that happened? It starts with Muhammad, I think, because Islam really connects the Far East and the Middle East to Europe, all the way through Spain up into France, actually, for a while, was the rise of Islam. And then, of course, Columbus discovers the Americas, even though he thought he was India. And the globalization happens as the smallpox kills off many of the Native Americans. They repopulate the Americans with African slaves. And so you've got Africa, America, Europe, China, all being connected together. And then technology takes over with the steam engine. And then we get the combustion engine and the telephone and the computer. You get the idea. So we get ourselves to the modern ages. So that's the sort of narrative thread to connect things together. But then I think to myself, how many times do people open the first page of a big long book, doesn't matter how old they are, and they think, how am I going to get all the way to the end? Well, there are lots of pictures and lots of maps and all that kind of stuff, but I rather thought how did people tell big stories before people knew how to read and write? And of course there are fantastic examples of great big stories that have been told in the past. For example, William the Conqueror, how does he tell his big story? He's so pleased with himself, it's lasted nearly 1,000 years. The Bayeux Tapestry, have you seen it, madam? It's amazing. It's longer than all the sides of this marquee. It's incredible, really. And it has hundreds of pictures in a chronological order, so they're in like a timeline. So I thought, could I take my book, What on Earth Happened, turn it into a timeline of, let's say, 1,000 pictures? And what would happen? Well, the first thing I had to do is redesign the book slightly and get rid of the spine. And so we created this thing called a Wallbook. And I need someone just to help me out here. What's your name? Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas. If you could stand here, that's fantastic. Nicholas, there we go. That's his end. This is my end here. And you will see we can unfold the book. It's 2.4 meters long. And at Nicholas's end, that's the Big Bang, 13.7 billion years ago, the beginning of the universe. At my end is the present day. And my chapters have become different colored streams. There are 12 chapters in this book. There's space, earth, sea, sky, land, the Stone Ages, and then we go into human history with the Far East, the Middle East and North Africa. This is Europe, this is America, this is Sub-Saharan Africa, and there's a little bit down the bottom here, which is Australia. I don't know if there's anybody here from Australia. Been to Australia? You are? Really? Well, you'll be delighted, madam, to see that we have some rabbits, an opera house and a cricket match, you know, so you don't feel left out. So it's all there, a fully inclusive story. But what was interesting, which I hadn't realized until doing this, is that if you want to connect things together, this is a much better way of doing it. Because if you choose a date like 1520, Nicholas, who's on the throne in 1520? He had 6 wives. Very good, Henry VIII. So we look along here and we find Henry VIII. These are all the kings and queens of England here. It's 1520. At the same time as Henry VIII, of course, they're building the Great Wall of China. And Columbus has discovered the Americas. And the Incas are building Machu Picchu. And the Africans are building Great Zimbabwe. The Turks have seized Constantinople. Vasco da Gama has discovered India. And Copernicus, who is an astronomer from Poland, has discovered that the Earth goes round the sun. And if you can't remember his name, his nickname is Copernicus, which makes it a little bit easier. So that's all happening at the same time. And you could do this all the way through history, you see. Right up to the present day. Who is this here? Do you have any idea? This man who's just died in South Africa, very famous man, Nicholas, what's his name? Excellent, Nelson Mandela. There's President Obama. We have President Mubarak, who's not there in Egypt anymore, and a terrible tsunami in Japan. I'm sure you heard about that on the 3rd of March 2011. It was so powerful, the earthquake on that day, that you know what happened? It picked up Japan and it moved it 2 meters to the left. Can you imagine picking up the whole of Japan and going 2 meters to the left? Extraordinary. So this is the idea. Thank you, Nicholas. Don't sit down. Don't sit down, we haven't finished yet. So you can read a short version of the story on the back. So it's a book as well as a wall. But